The Mystery of the Missing Triplets. In a big hospital in Lagos, there was a mother named Adeobi. She was very happy because she just had 3 little babies. They were triplets, and their names were Chiamaka, Chinonso, and Chukwudi. These 3 babies were very special. They all had the same birthmark on their tiny little arms. It looked like a small star. After the babies were born, Nurse Nkem told Adeobi, "Your babies need to go to the ICU for some care. We will bring them back soon." Adeobi trusted the nurses, so she nodded and let them take her babies. But deep inside, she felt a little worried. She wanted to hold her babies close and never let them go. Hours passed, but the nurses didn't bring the babies back. Adeobi asked Nurse Nkem, "Where are my babies? I want to see them now." Nurse Nkem looked confused. "They should be in the ICU," she said. But when they went to the ICU, the babies were not there. Adeobi's heart started to beat very fast. "Where are my babies?" she cried. The doctors and nurses searched the whole hospital, but the triplets were nowhere to be found. Adeobi felt her world fall apart. Her precious Chiamaka, Chinonso, and Chukwudi were missing. She was so sad, but she knew she could not give up. "I will find my babies, no matter what," Adeobi promised herself. She felt like a lioness, strong and ready to fight. She was determined to find out what happened to her triplets. She didn't know who took them or why, but she knew she would not rest until her babies were back in her arms. As Adeobi started her search, strange things began to happen. The lights in the hospital flickered, and shadows moved in the corners. It felt like someone, or something, didn't want her to find the truth. But Adeobi was brave. She held on to the hope that she would find her babies, even if she had to go through dark and scary places. And so, Adeobi's journey to find her triplets began. But who took them? And why? The answers were hidden in the shadows, waiting for Adeobi to uncover the mystery. Adeobi felt so scared, but she knew she had to be strong. Her babies, Chiamaka, Chinonso, and Chukwudi, were somewhere out there, waiting for her to find them. She walked through the big hospital, looking everywhere. The halls were quiet, too quiet. It made Adeobi feel very uneasy. As she walked, she heard a soft cry. It was faint, but Adeobi knew that cry. It sounded like one of her babies. Her heart started to beat fast. She followed the sound, her feet moving quickly down a dark hallway. But then, the crying stopped. Adeobi looked around and saw a door at the end of the hallway. The door was slightly open, and a dim light was coming from inside. She slowly pushed the door open and stepped into a small room. The room was empty, but there was something strange about it. On the wall, there was a drawing of 3 little stars, just like the birthmarks on her babies. Adeobi touched the drawing, her fingers trembling. "Who did this?" she whispered. Just then, Nurse Nkem appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sounding worried. Adeobi turned to her, her eyes wide with fear and hope. "I heard my baby crying. Where are they? What happened to them?" Nurse Nkem didn't answer right away. She looked at the drawing on the wall and then back at Adeobi. "You need to leave this room," she said, her voice shaking a little. "This is not a place you should be." But Adeobi didn't want to leave. She wanted answers. "Please, tell me where my babies are," she begged. Nurse Nkem looked around, as if checking if someone was watching them. Then, she leaned closer to Adeobi and whispered, "There are secrets in this hospital. Dangerous secrets. But I will help you. Meet me in the garden behind the hospital at midnight. I will tell you what I know." Adeobi felt a chill run down her spine. "Midnight?" she asked, feeling scared but also curious. "Yes," Nurse Nkem said. "But be careful. Not everyone wants you to find your babies." With that, Nurse Nkem left the room, leaving Adeobi alone with her thoughts. Adeobi knew she had to be brave. She would meet Nurse Nkem in the garden, and maybe, just maybe, she would find out what happened to her precious triplets. But who was hiding them? And why? The answers were still a mystery, but Adeobi was ready to face whatever came next. When midnight came, Adeobi quietly left her room and walked to the garden behind the hospital. The night was dark, and the only light came from the moon. The garden was quiet, with tall trees and bushes all around. Adeobi felt her heart pounding in her chest. She knew she had to be brave for her babies. As she walked, she saw Nurse Nkem standing near a big tree. The nurse looked around nervously, as if she was afraid someone might see them. Adeobi walked up to her. "I'm here," she whispered. "Please, tell me where my babies are." Nurse Nkem took a deep breath. "Adeobi, there is something very strange happening in this hospital. Some people here, they are not who they say they are. They took your babies, but I don't know why." Adeobi felt tears in her eyes. "Who took them? Where are they?" "I think they are still in the hospital, but hidden," Nurse Nkem said. "There's a secret place in the basement. I heard whispers about it. Maybe the babies are there." Adeobi felt a mix of hope and fear. "Can you take me there?" she asked. Nurse Nkem nodded. "Yes, but we have to be very careful. If anyone sees us, we could be in big trouble." Together, they walked quietly through the garden and back into the hospital. Nurse Nkem led Adeobi to a small door that was hidden behind some old boxes. The door creaked as Nurse Nkem opened it, revealing a dark staircase leading down. "This is the way to the basement," Nurse Nkem whispered. "We have to be very quiet." Adeobi held her breath and followed Nurse Nkem down the stairs. The air grew colder as they went deeper into the basement. The walls were made of stone, and there were no windows. It felt like they were walking into a dark, secret world. At the bottom of the stairs, there was a long hallway with doors on each side. Nurse Nkem pointed to one of the doors. "I think they are in there," she said softly. Adeobi's hands were shaking as she reached for the door handle. She slowly pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dark, but she could hear soft breathing, like tiny whispers in the night. Nurse Nkem turned on a small flashlight, and the light fell on 3 tiny cribs in the corner of the room. Adeobi gasped. There, in the cribs, were her babies. Chiamaka, Chinonso, and Chukwudi. They were safe, but they were sleeping, and their little faces looked so peaceful. Tears filled Adeobi's eyes. "My babies," she cried, rushing to the cribs and picking them up one by one. She held them close, feeling their warmth against her skin. "I found you. Mommy is here." But just as Adeobi was about to leave the room with her babies, she heard footsteps coming from the hallway. Someone was coming. Nurse Nkem looked scared. "We have to hide," she whispered. Adeobi's heart raced. She had found her babies, but now they were in danger again. Who was coming? And what would they do if they found them here? The mystery was far from over, and Adeobi knew she had to protect her triplets, no matter what. Adeobi's heart pounded as she held her babies close. She could hear the footsteps getting closer and closer. Nurse Nkem looked around the room, searching for a place to hide. "There." Nurse Nkem whispered, pointing to a big cabinet in the corner of the room. "We can hide in there." Adeobi quickly and quietly followed Nurse Nkem to the cabinet. They opened the doors and carefully squeezed inside. Adeobi held Chiamaka, Chinonso, and Chukwudi close, trying to keep them quiet. The cabinet was dark and small, and Adeobi could barely breathe. Just then, the door to the room creaked open. Adeobi held her breath. She could hear someone walking into the room. The footsteps were slow, like the person was looking for something, or someone. Adeobi prayed that the person wouldn't find them. She could feel her baby's tiny hearts beating fast, just like hers. The person walked around the room, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Adeobi heard them stop right in front of the cabinet. Her heart skipped a beat. The person was so close now. What if they opened the cabinet and found them? Suddenly, the person spoke. It was a deep voice, one Adeobi didn't recognize. "Where are they?" the voice whispered to itself. "They were supposed to be here." Adeobi felt her body tense up. She didn't know who this person was, but she knew they were dangerous. She prayed again that the person wouldn't open the cabinet. After what felt like forever, the footsteps moved away from the cabinet. The person walked to the door and stopped. "I will find them," the voice said softly, almost like a promise. Then, the door closed, and the room was quiet again. Adeobi let out a shaky breath. They were safe, for now. Nurse Nkem slowly opened the cabinet doors, and they carefully stepped out. Adeobi's legs felt wobbly, but she knew they had to move quickly. "We can't stay here," Nurse Nkem whispered. "We have to get out of the hospital before they come back." "But where can we go?" Adeobi asked, her voice trembling. Nurse Nkem thought for a moment. "There's a back door that leads to the outside. We can go through there and hide until it's safe." Adeobi nodded. She didn't know what else to do, but she trusted Nurse Nkem. With her babies in her arms, Adeobi followed Nurse Nkem out of the room and down the long, dark hallway. They moved quietly, listening for any sound that might mean danger. Finally, they reached the back door. Nurse Nkem pushed it open, and the cool night air rushed in. Adeobi felt a small sense of relief, but she knew they weren't safe yet. They needed to find a place to hide. "Follow me," Nurse Nkem said, leading Adeobi into the shadows outside the hospital. They walked through the dark, their footsteps soft on the ground. Adeobi kept looking around, afraid that someone might be following them. As they walked, Adeobi wondered who that person in the room was. Why were they looking for her babies? And what were they going to do next? The night was full of mysteries, and Adeobi knew she had to be brave. She would protect her triplets, no matter what, and she would keep fighting until they were truly safe. But the danger was not over yet. There were still many questions, and the answers were hiding in the dark. Adeobi and Nurse Nkem moved quickly through the night. The hospital was now behind them, but the darkness around them felt heavy and full of secrets. Adeobi kept looking down at her babies, making sure they were safe in her arms. They were so small and so precious. She had to protect them. Nurse Nkem led Adeobi to a small house near the edge of the hospital grounds. The house looked old and quiet. "We can hide here," Nurse Nkem whispered. "No one will find us." They quietly entered the house and closed the door behind them. Inside, it was dark and a little dusty, but it felt safe. Adeobi found a soft chair and gently placed her babies there. They were still sleeping, their tiny faces calm. "We need to rest," Nurse Nkem said. "But we also need to think about what to do next." Adeobi nodded. She was so tired, but her mind was still full of questions. "Who was that person in the room?" she asked softly. "Why do they want my babies?" Nurse Nkem looked serious. "I don't know who they are, but I heard some of the doctors talking. They mentioned something about special babies with birthmarks. They think those babies have powers or something." Adeobi's eyes widened. "Powers? But they are just babies." "I know," Nurse Nkem said. "But some people believe strange things. They might think your babies are special because of their birthmarks." Adeobi looked at her babies, fear and worry filling her heart. "I don't care about any powers. I just want my babies to be safe." Nurse Nkem nodded. "We have to be careful. They might come looking for us again. But I have an idea. There's an old friend of mine who lives far away from here. She can help us hide and keep the babies safe. Will it be far from here?" Adeobi asked, feeling nervous about leaving the hospital and everything she knew. "Yes, it's far," Nurse Nkem said. "But it's the only way to keep them safe. We can leave in the morning when it's light." Adeobi knew it was the right thing to do, but she felt scared. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she knew she had to be brave for her babies. She would do anything to keep them safe, even if it meant leaving everything behind. That night, Adeobi couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the person who was looking for her babies and the strange things Nurse Nkem had told her. What if they found her and her babies again? What if they were never truly safe? But as she watched her babies sleeping peacefully, Adeobi felt a strong feeling in her heart. She was their mother, and she would protect them no matter what. Even though the night was dark and full of danger, Adeobi knew she had to keep going. Morning would come soon, and with it, a new journey to keep her babies safe. But what other dangers might they face along the way? The mystery was still deep, and Adeobi knew they were only at the beginning of their long and difficult journey. Morning came, and the sun peeked through the windows of the small house. Adeobi hadn't slept much, but she knew it was time to leave. The babies were still sleeping, their little faces so peaceful. Adeobi gently picked them up, one by one, and wrapped them in a soft blanket. Nurse Nkem came into the room. She had a small bag in her hand. I packed some things for the journey, she said. We need to leave now, before anyone notices we're gone. Adeobi nodded. She felt a little scared, but she knew they had to go. Where is your friend? She asked as they stepped outside into the early morning light. She lives in a village far from here, Nurse Nkem said. We can take a bus part of the way, and then we'll walk. It will be a long journey, but we will be safe there. Adeobi held her babies close as they walked to the bus stop. The streets were quiet, and the city was just waking up. Adeobi couldn't stop thinking about the person who had searched for them in the hospital. What if they were still looking for her babies? What if they followed them? When they reached the bus stop, Nurse Nkem bought tickets. They waited quietly until the bus arrived. The bus was old and a little noisy, but it would take them far away from the hospital and the dangers that lurked there. As the bus drove through the city, Adeobi looked out the window, watching the buildings and people go by. She felt a little sad to leave her home, but she knew it was the only way to keep her babies safe. She looked down at Chiamaka, Chinonso, and Chukwudi, who were still sleeping in her arms. They were her world, and she would do anything for them. Hours passed, and the bus finally stopped at a small village. The village was quiet, with green trees and little houses. It felt peaceful, but Adeobi knew they couldn't stay here long. They still had a journey to make. We have to walk from here, Nurse Nkem said. My friend's house is in the forest, away from the village. Adeobi nodded and followed Nurse Nkem as they walked down a narrow path that led into the forest. The trees were tall, and the air was fresh. It felt like they were entering a different world, far from the noise and dangers of the city. As they walked deeper into the forest, Adeobi started to feel a little safer. The trees seemed to protect them, and the birds sang softly above. But she knew they couldn't relax yet. They had to keep moving. Finally, after what felt like a long time, they reached a small house hidden among the trees. It was a cozy house with a thatched roof and flowers growing outside. Nurse Nkem smiled. This is it, she said. My friend lives here. Nurse Nkem knocked on the door, and after a moment, an old woman opened it. She had kind eyes and a warm smile. Nkem, my dear friend, the woman said. Come in, come in. This is my friend Adeobi, Nurse Nkem said, introducing Adeobi to the woman. She needs help. Her babies are in danger, and we need a safe place to stay. The old woman looked at Adeobi and her babies and nodded. You are welcome here, she said softly. No one will find you in this place. Adeobi felt a wave of relief. They were safe, at least for now. The old woman showed them into the house, where there was a soft bed and a warm fire. Adeobi gently laid her babies on the bed and kissed their tiny foreheads. She felt so thankful to have found a place where they could rest. But as the night fell and the forest grew dark, Adeobi couldn't help but wonder. Were they really safe here? Or was the danger still following them, waiting in the shadows? The mystery of the missing triplets was not over yet, and Adeobi knew she had to stay strong. Adeobi felt safe in the little house deep in the forest, but she knew she couldn't relax completely. The babies were finally resting peacefully on the soft bed, and Adeobi sat beside them, watching them breathe. Chiamaka, Chinonso, and Chukwudi looked so tiny and innocent. Adeobi smiled at them, but her heart was still worried. The old woman, whose name was Mama Ifema, brought some warm food for Adeobi and Nurse Nkem. You must be hungry, Mama Ifema said kindly. Eat, and then rest. You have been through a lot. Adeobi thanked her and took a bite of the food. It was warm and comforting, but her mind was still full of questions. Mama Ifema, Adeobi began, do you think we are really safe here? What if they come looking for us? Mama Ifema sat down beside Adeobi. My dear, this forest is very old and very quiet. Not many people know about this place. But we must still be careful. We will keep the doors locked and we will watch for any signs of danger. Nurse Nkem nodded. Mama Ifema is right. We must be ready for anything. But for now, let's rest. Tomorrow, we can think about what to do next. Adeobi agreed, though she still felt uneasy. After eating, she lay down beside her babies, holding them close. The warmth of the fire and the gentle sounds of the forest made her feel a little calmer, and soon, she drifted off to sleep. But in the middle of the night, Adeobi woke up suddenly. Something didn't feel right. The room was dark, and the fire had died down. She listened carefully and heard a strange noise outside the window, like leaves rustling. Adeobi's heart started to race. She quietly got out of bed and went to the window. She peeked outside but saw nothing in the darkness. Just as she was about to turn away, she saw a shadow move near the trees. Someone was out there. Adeobi quickly went to Nurse Nkem and Mama Ifema, who were sleeping in the next room. Wake up, she whispered urgently. Someone is outside. Nurse Nkem and Mama Ifema woke up quickly. Mama Ifema grabbed a lantern and turned it on. The soft light filled the room, and they all looked at each other with worry. Stay here with the babies, Mama Ifema said. Nkem and I will go check outside. Adeobi wanted to go with them, but she knew she had to stay with her babies. She watched as Nurse Nkem and Mama Ifema quietly left the house, holding the lantern to light their way. Adeobi stayed by the window, watching them disappear into the darkness. She could hear her heart beating loudly in her chest. She prayed that they would be safe and that the shadow outside was just the wind or an animal. Minutes felt like hours as Adeobi waited. She kept looking at her babies, making sure they were still safe and sound. But the fear in her heart wouldn't go away. Finally, the door creaked open, and Nurse Nkem and Mama Ifema came back inside. They looked serious but not too worried. It's okay, Nurse Nkem said softly. We didn't see anyone. It might have just been an animal. But Adeobi wasn't sure. Are you sure? She asked, her voice trembling. Mama Ifema put her hand on Adeobi's shoulder. We will keep watching, my dear. But for now, try to rest. We will keep you and your babies safe. Adeobi nodded, though she still felt uneasy. She returned to the bed and lay down beside her babies again, holding them close. But even as she closed her eyes, she couldn't stop thinking about the shadow she saw. Was it really just an animal, or was it something more? The mystery was still deep, and the danger was still out there, hiding in the darkness. But Adeobi knew she had to stay strong and keep her babies safe, no matter what. The journey was not over yet. Morning came slowly, with the soft light of the sun filtering through the trees. Adeobi hadn't slept much, but she was relieved to see the daylight. She looked at her babies, who were still sleeping peacefully. Their tiny faces made her smile, even though she was still worried. Mama Ifema came into the room with a cup of warm tea. Good morning, my dear, she said kindly. Drink this. It will help you feel better. Adeobi took the tea and sipped it slowly. Thank you, Mama Ifema, she said. But I'm still scared. What if the shadow I saw was someone looking for us? Mama Ifema sat down beside Adeobi. I understand, Adeobi. It's normal to feel scared after everything that has happened. But we must stay strong. I have a plan to keep us safe. Adeobi looked at her with hope. What is the plan, Mama Ifema? Mama Ifema smiled gently. We will stay here for a few days, hidden in the forest. If anyone comes looking, we will hear them before they find us. But if things get dangerous, we will move deeper into the forest to a secret place that only I know about. No one will find us there. Nurse Nkem, who had been listening, nodded in agreement. Mama Ifema is right. This forest is very big and full of hidden paths. We will be safe if we stick together. Adeobi felt a little better knowing that they had a plan. But she still couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, looking for her babies. She knew she had to be ready for anything. The day passed quietly. Adeobi spent her time caring for her babies, feeding them and singing soft songs to keep them calm. Chiamaka, Chinonso, and Chukwudi were happy and playful, unaware of the danger around them. In the afternoon, Mama Ifema showed Adeobi and Nurse Nkem how to use the forest to stay safe. She taught them how to listen to the sounds of the birds and the wind, and how to spot signs if someone was nearby. Adeobi tried to learn everything she could. She wanted to be ready to protect her babies if anything happened. As the sun began to set, the forest grew quieter. The shadows stretched long across the ground, and the air became cooler. Adeobi felt a chill run down her spine as she remembered the shadow she had seen the night before. Just then, a sound echoed through the trees. It was a low, rustling noise, like someone walking on dry leaves. Adeobi's heart started to race. Nurse Nkem and Mama Ifema heard it too. They exchanged a worried glance. "We must be ready," Mama Ifema whispered. "Stay inside with the babies, Adeobi. Nkem and I will check outside again." Adeobi nodded, holding her babies close. She watched as Nurse Nkem and Mama Ifema quietly left the house. The door closed softly behind them, leaving Adeobi alone with the babies. She listened carefully, trying to hear what was happening outside. The minutes ticked by slowly. The house was so quiet that Adeobi could hear her own breathing. She kept looking at the door, hoping that Mama Ifema and Nurse Nkem would come back soon with good news. Finally, the door creaked open, and they returned. This time, they looked more serious than before. "What did you see?" Adeobi asked, her voice shaking a little. Mama Ifema sighed. "We found footprints near the edge of the forest. They are fresh, which means someone was here not long ago." Adeobi's heart sank. "What do we do now?" "We must be even more careful," Nurse Nkem said. "We will stay inside tonight and keep the doors locked. If anything happens, we will leave quickly and go to the secret place deeper in the forest." Adeobi nodded, trying to stay calm. The mystery was growing, and the danger was getting closer. But Adeobi knew she had to stay strong. She looked at her babies, who were still safe in her arms. She would do anything to protect them, no matter what came next. The night was coming, and with it, more unknowns. But Adeobi was ready to face whatever was out there, to keep her triplets safe. Days turned into weeks, and Adeobi stayed hidden in the forest with her babies, Mama Ifema and Nurse Nkem. The danger seemed to get closer every day, but Adeobi never gave up hope. She prayed every night that she would find a way to keep her babies safe and that they would live a happy life together. One evening, just as the sun was setting, there was a knock on the door. Adeobi's heart leapt in her chest. Who could it be? Mama Ifema and Nurse Nkem looked at each other with worry, but they carefully opened the door. To their surprise, it was a group of men from the village, led by a kind doctor who had once worked at the hospital. He had been searching for Adeobi and her babies for weeks, wanting to help. "I have good news, Adeobi," the doctor said with a warm smile. "The people who were looking for your babies have been caught. You and your triplets are safe now. You can go home." Adeobi couldn't believe what she was hearing. Tears filled her eyes as she hugged her babies close. She had been so scared, but now, at last, they were safe. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. "Thank you so much." The next day, Adeobi, Nurse Nkem, and Mama Ifema left the forest and returned to the village. The villagers welcomed them with open arms, and everyone was amazed at how beautiful and strong Adeobi's triplets were. Chiamaka, Chinonso, and Chukwudi had grown a little during their time in the forest, and they were the most beautiful identical triplets anyone had ever seen. As the years passed, Adeobi's triplets grew up healthy and happy. They were known throughout the land for their beauty, kindness, and the special bond they shared. The birthmark that had once caused so much trouble became a symbol of their strength and unity. When they became adults, each of the triplets found love and married. Their weddings were the grandest celebrations anyone had ever seen, filled with joy and laughter. Chiamaka, Chinonso, and Chukwudi all had large families, and between them, they had 50 children. The village was filled with the sounds of children's laughter, and Adeobi's heart was full. Adeobi watched her children and grandchildren grow, feeling proud and blessed. She had fought so hard to protect her triplets, and now they were living a life full of love and happiness. They were a true example of how strong a mother's love can be. And so, Adeobi, her triplets, and their big, happy family lived peacefully ever after. The mystery of the missing triplets had come to a joyful end, and their story was told for many generations, reminding everyone that with love and courage, anything is possible. The end. Subscribe to this channel for more interesting videos.